Okay, think about the products you interact with. Like every single day, your laundry detergent, maybe that body wash, like your deodorant. There's often that clean, sort of lasting scent, right?
That persistent smell. It's often a synthetic musk, and they're incredibly common. One you've almost certainly smelled, probably without knowing it. It's called Galaxolide.
Galaxolide. Okay, right. Let's dig into this. We've been looking at some market insight material you shared about it. Our mission really for this deep dive is to understand what's happening with this ingredient right now and maybe where it's headed.
Yeah, and the material we reviewed, it really lays out this fascinating tension. It's right at the heart of Galaxolide's story. On one side, you've got its huge popularity, widespread use, market growth, driven by some really practical benefits for manufacturers. But on the other side, there are these increasing environmental and, frankly, health concerns that are starting to challenge its position.
Right. Makes sense why it's everywhere. The material highlights that manufacturers love it because, well, it blends well with other scents, apparently, and it's photostable. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Photostable just means it doesn't easily break down or change when exposed to light. So the scent lasts longer, that's a big plus. And crucially, it's way cheaper than natural musks, significantly.
Okay. Cost and longevity. That explains the massive global demand, especially as the material notes, with consumer spending on the rise.
But here's where that tension really comes in. While it's great for cost and, making scents last, Galaxolide is identified as persistent and bioaccumulative.
Persistent and bioaccumulative. Okay, hang on. Let's unpack that a little.
Sure.
What does that actually mean?
Well, persistent means it just doesn't break down easily in the environment. It sticks around. And bioaccumulative is the crucial part. It means it can build up over time, not just in, say, water systems. The material specifically mentions it's been found accumulating in human tissue.
Wow. In human tissue. Okay, that definitely makes you think differently about that lingering clean scent, doesn't it? So what does that potential buildup mean health-wise?
It's definitely raising concerns, and it's caught the eye of regulators, that's for sure. The material points out that agencies, especially in Europe, under their REACH framework.
REACH, right? That's the big European chemical regulation system.
Exactly. REACH stands for Registration, Evaluation, Authorization, and Restriction of Chemicals. It's their main control system. And they're scrutinizing these polycyclic musks, like Galaxolide, because they're linked to potential endocrine disrupting effects.
Endocrine disrupting.
Right.
What does that generally imply? What's the worry there?
The worry is they could potentially interfere with the body's hormone systems, the endocrine system, which obviously raises health questions that regulators are now looking into very seriously. This could absolutely lead to restrictions down the line.
And it seems like it's not just regulators pushing back, is it? Consumers are also playing a big part. There's this whole trend, this growing preference for clean products or natural labels.
Absolutely. Consumers are much more aware now. They're looking for transparency, avoiding ingredients they see as potentially harmful or bad for the environment. And that pressure, it's really prompting brands to actively reformulate their products.
So the industry isn't just like sitting back and waiting for rules to change. The material suggests there's quite a bit of innovation happening.
Exactly right. There's a real push for safer alternatives, things that are more biodegradable. It often aligns with green chemistry principles, designing chemicals to be more sustainable from the start. Plus, brands are facing more pressure just to disclose ingredients, which forces them to look harder at things like Galaxolide and think about phasing them out.
And we're already seeing actual changes based on this. The material explicitly says that big companies, names like Unilever and Procter & Gamble, they've actually started reformulating some product lines already, moving away from Galaxolide. That feels like a pretty strong signal.
It really is. It underscores how all these factors, regulation, consumer demand, industry innovation, they're all coming together to reshape the fragrance landscape.
So if we boil it down, the key takeaway from our deep dive into this material seems pretty clear. Galaxolide, even though it's been around forever and still everywhere, it's definitely facing a big shift, a transition. It's being squeezed by tighter regulations, by us consumers wanting cleaner stuff, and by the industry itself finding safer options.
And like we saw, this isn't just talk. Major companies are already making these changes. You're seeing it on the shelves.
Which means this directly impacts the everyday products you choose, what's actually in them. It's not just some abstract market report.
Which leads to a really interesting thought for you to consider. As these brands keep reformulating and the rules get stricter, how might those familiar scents all around us actually change in the next few years? And maybe more importantly, what does that mean for the balance we all strike between wanting nice fragrances, keeping costs down, and thinking about sustainability?
Okay, welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a market you interact with almost every day, maybe without even, realizing it fully.
That's right.
We're taking a deep dive into the global market for a specific synthetic musk fragrance compound. It's called Galaxolide.
Exactly. And we're basing this on a really detailed analysis from cognitive market research. It's packed with figures, projections.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Research. It's packed with figures, projections, lots to unpack.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to cut through that raw data,
Yeah.
all the millions of dollars, the percentages, the forecast years, and pull out the key takeaways. We want to give you a clear picture of where this market is right now and, where it seems to be heading.
So we'll start with the big global view first, get a sense of the overall direction,
Right.
and then we'll drill down into the regions North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Middle East and Africa. Get into the specifics there.
And why should you care about, this particular chemical?
Good question.
Because Galaxolide, it's a foundational ingredient in just a huge range of consumer products.
Absolutely. Think personal care items.
Yeah, cleaning supplies, laundry detergents, and obviously perfumes, colognes.
Right. So understanding this market, its size, its growth, it gives you a really fascinating window into a major chunk of the chemical industry and the consumer goods sector.
Definitely. So let's start with that global overview then. What's the source telling us about the overall market size? Where are we starting from?
Okay, so looking at the big picture, the cognitive market research analysis puts the global Galaxolide market value at nearly $249 million. To be precise, $248.96 million. That was back in 2021.
Okay, so a solid starting point. Where's it going from there? Is it growing?
Oh, yeah, the trajectory is consistently upward. The projection is for it to cross the $300 million mark fairly soon,
Okay.
hitting around $303.77 million by 2025. And then it just continues that steady growth to reach, quite a significant figure, $452.23 million by 2033.
Wow, okay, so that's quite a climb over, a little more than a decade?
It is.
The source mentions a compound annual growth rate, a KAGR. Right. What was that figure?
Yeah, the overall CAGR is pegged at 5.1% across that forecast period.
5.1%. And what's really pushing that steady demand?
Well, it really boils down to its usefulness and, frankly, its cost effectiveness. As the source points out, the main drivers are just the rising demand for Galaxolide and those core applications you mentioned, personal care, cleaning products, fragrance formulations, and that's happening globally. It's just a reliable, widely used musk ingredient.
Okay, so the global picture is one of steady, pretty healthy expansion, almost doubling in value over about 12 years, give or take.
That's the takeaway, yeah.
But, like you said, the interesting part is often in the details, because that growth isn't necessarily the same everywhere. Let's start drilling down. How about North America?
Right. North America is definitely a substantial piece of this market. The analysis showed its value at $70.5 million back in 2021.
Okay.
And that's expected to grow to $83.5 million by 2025, and then reach $120.7 million by 2033.
So a big slice of the global pie, growing more or less in line with the overall trend. What's the regional growth rate there, the CAGR?
The overall KGR for North America comes in at 4.7%. So, just a touch below that global average of 5.1%.
Right.
And within North America, no big surprise, the United States leads the pack. It's the largest single country market in the region.
Makes sense. What are the U.S. numbers?
Its value was $48.1 million in 2021, projected to hit $56.4 million in 2025, and then $80.7 million by 2033. That works out to a CAGR of 4.6%.
Okay, 4.6%. And what about Canada and Mexico? Are they following similar patterns?
They are, yeah. They follow the U.S., but with slightly different growth rates, which is interesting. Canada was valued at $14.4 million in 2021, growing to $17.5 million by 2025, and the forecast puts it at $26 million in 2033. Now, interestingly, Canada's CAGR is actually a bit higher than the U.S. It matches the global average at 5.1%.
Oh.
Yeah. And Mexico shows $8 million in 2021, expected to grow to $9.6 million by 2025, and $14.1 million by 2033. That's a 4.9% CAGR.
So all three are contributing to that solid regional growth. but Canada's actually growing slightly faster percentage-wise.
Exactly. It highlights that even within, what we consider a mature market like North America, you still see these little variations.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's pivot. Across the Atlantic now, Europe. What's the story there, according to the source?
Europe is another major sort of established market for Galaxolide. Its sales revenue back in 2021 was $61 million.
Right.
That's projected to increase to $71.8 million by 2025 and then reach $103.1 million by 2033.
And the growth rate, the European CGR.
Overall, European CGR actually matches North America's, interestingly. It's 4.6%.
Okay, 4.6% again. And within Europe, are there specific countries leading the way or any notable trends?
Yeah, the source calls out the UK, Germany, and France as major contributors, and their growth rates are really quite similar, kind of clustered around 4.4% to 4.5% CAGR over the forecast period.
Pretty tight range.
Very much so. For instance, Germany was around $11.2 million in 2021, projected to reach $18.5 million by 2033. The UK, it went from $9.3 million to $15.3 million over that same time frame. And France from $9 million up to $14.7 million.
Got it.
And other significant markets like Italy, Russia, Spain, they also show steady CAGRs, are right around 4.4%. They started in the, 5.7 to $7.6 million range in 2021 and are projected to grow to between $9.3 million and $12.5 million by 2033.
So much like North America, Europe looks like a market with widespread, steady growth, just slightly below that global average among the major players.
Pretty much sums it up, although what is kind of fascinating here is the rest of Europe category.
Oh, wow. What about it?
Well, this grouping actually stands out. It has a higher CAGR, 5.9%.
Oh, wow. Higher than the big players?
Yeah. Going from $6.9 million in 2021 up to $14.3 million in 2033, it suggests there are some strong, maybe less talked about growth pockets elsewhere on the continent.
That's a great point. That higher rate in the rest of Europe really shows why drilling down is important. Okay, let's shift focus again. The region the source says shows particularly strong momentum, Asia-Pacific.
Right, this is where you really see the acceleration happening. Asia-Pacic's revenue was already substantial, $88.9 million back in 2021.
Already bigger than North America or Europe then.
Exactly. And it's projected to jump to $114.4 million by 2025, and then really soar to $179.1 million by 2033.
Wow, okay, that is a dramatic increase compared to the sort of absolute dollar growth we saw in North America or Europe.
It really is. The Asia-Pacific CAGR is a very robust 5.8%. That's significantly outpacing the developed markets.
And who's leading the charge there? Is it China?
As you might expect, yes. China holds the largest market share within the region. China's value was $35.7 million in 2021.
Okay.
Set to hit $47.3 million in 2025, and projected to reach a really substantial $76.1 million by 2033. That's growing at a CAGR of 6.1%.
6.1%, so above the regional average too. But is China the fastest grower, or is there another standout?
Good question. The analysis specifically highlights India. It's emerging with the fastest growth rate in the entire region.
Really faster than China.
Yeah, posting a...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
fastest growth rate in the entire region.
Really faster than China.
Yeah, posting a CAGR of 6.3%. Now, it's starting from a smaller base, $13.6 million in 2021.
Right.
But it's projected for really significant expansion, hitting $29.9 million by 2033.
That's more than double. Impressive.
It is. And other key economies like Japan, South Korea, Australia, they also show healthy growth contributing to that regional total. Their 2033 projections are around $32 million for Japan, $17.6 million for South Korea, and about $9.8 million for Australia.
Okay.
And even Southeast Asia, which starts smaller at $6 million in 2021, shows steady growth. It's projected at $10.9 million by 2033 with a 4.6% CAGR. So similar to Europe's rate.
Right. It's just crystal clear that Asia-Pacific, led by China, but really fueled by India's rapid expansion, is set to be the powerhouse for this market's growth over the next decade.
Absolutely the key growth engine based on this data.
Okay, let's look at Latin America next. What's the picture there?
In Latin America, the overall market is smaller than the regions we've discussed so far, but it also shows some pockets of notable growth. Brazil really dominates the regional numbers. It was valued at $6.4 million in 2021 and projected to grow to $12.1 million by 2033. That's with a 5.3% CAGR, so slightly above the global average.
And similar to other regions, are there other countries showing particular momentum?
Yes, the source mentions Argentina, Colombia, and Peru demonstrating growth, but it specifically highlights Chile.
Chile, what's happening there?
It's leading the region in terms of growth rate. Chile shows a 6.3% CAGR.
Whoa, 6.3%. That's the same as India.
Exactly. It's a significant jump from a smaller base, $1.1 million in 2021, projected to $2.5 million by 2033. So smaller dollar value, yes, but that percentage growth is really impressive.
That is interesting, seeing that same high growth rate pop up in different parts of the world. Okay, finally, let's touch on the Middle East and Africa region.
Right. This region presents a more mixed picture growth-wise. Egypt shows moderate growth, moving from $1.9 million in 2021 to about $3 million by 2033. That's a 4% CAGR.
Okay.
Turkey is projected to reach $3.6 million by 2033, with a slightly lower CAGR of 3.9%. What really stands out here, though, is the rest of the Middle East category. The source identifies this as having the slowest growth across all the regions discussed.
Slowest. How slow?
Moving from $1.4 million in 2021 to just $1.8 million by 2033. That represents a CGR of only 2.8%.
Wow. Okay. Big difference compared to Asia Pacific or even Latin America's leaders.
A very big difference, yeah.
So we've seen the global numbers, then we've kind of crisscrossed the globe, region by region, country by country.
Yeah.
When we step back and try to connect all these dots, what's the main story this data is telling us about the Galaxolide market?
Well, if we synthesize it all, the data paints a pretty clear picture. While the developed economies, North America, Europe, they provide a stable base with steady, predictable growth.
Right.
It's really the emerging markets, particularly in Asia Pacific, and then specific countries in Latin America like Chile and Brazil, that are poised to drive the lion's share of the future expansion.
That's where the high growth rates are.
Exactly. Those are the regions showing significantly higher percentage growth rates. And it seems fueled by, increasing consumer bases and just growing demand for the kinds of products that use Galaxolide.
And this continued growth globally, it's really underpinned by the compound's basic role in all these everyday products we talked about.
Precisely. The source really highlights its enduring relevance. It's partly due to its key position in many fragrance formulations, but also its cost efficiency. That makes it attractive for mass market products.
Right.
And its widespread use in household and personal care goods. Well, demand for those is just increasing, especially in those high growth emerging markets.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up our deep dive into this, fascinating kind of unseen market, we've charted its course from around $250 million today towards potentially $500 million by 2033, powered by a steady global growth rate overall. But the real story seems to be in those regional variations, the consistent, slower growth in established markets versus the faster, much more dramatic expansion projected for Asia Pacific and parts of Latin America.
Yeah, countries like China, India, Chile really standing out with strong momentum.
It gives you a really granular view of the market dynamics, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Highlighting where the growth engines are really located and just the different speeds of expansion around the world.
It certainly does.
Hopefully this deep dive into the numbers has given you, our listener, a much clearer picture of this specific yet pretty pervasive market that touches our lives, every single day through the products we use.
And this brings up an important point to maybe leave people thinking about.
Yeah.
The analysis does mention that regulatory and environmental factors are expected to influence the long-term trajectories for this market.
Okay. That's a big one.
It is. So what does that actually mean for the future of a compound like Galaxolide, given how widespread its use is? How might potential future regulations or maybe shifting environmental concerns shape the demand, the production, maybe even the very numbers we've just been discussing?
Right. How might those external forces reshape this picture?
Exactly. It's definitely something for you to think about perhaps the next time you encounter that, familiar scent in your daily routine.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.